Welcome to the ICU podcast, where we explore the vestibular experience through conversations between patients and the health professionals who care for them.
During this podcast, we invite patients to share their stories and healthcare professionals to ask questions so they are equipped to better care for and truly see the invisible challenges faced by their patients. I'm Kimberly Warner.
And I'm Cynthia Ryan, and we are your hosts on this journey of discovery.
Welcome, everyone, to the ICU podcast. We have a really fascinating discussion today. I think this is one for all of us because who doesn't like to travel, right? But traveling with vestibular disorders can feel impossible and certainly problematic. Obstacles like rapid altitude changes, visual disturbances, patterned airport carpets, oh my God, they're the worst, and passive motion can amplify symptoms. Many people with vestibular dysfunction need accommodations or restrictions to prevent symptoms, attacks, or flare-ups. Having a vestibular disorder should not, however, prevent someone from traveling. So today we're going to talk with two vestibular patients who are also professional travelers. Our first guest is Arthur Wooten, and he actually is an award-winning playwright and novelist who works for Passport Magazine as a feature travel writer. So he travels a lot. In 2005, Arthur developed a life-changing diagnosis of bilateral vestibular loss. And to this day, he still experiences symptoms 24/7. In 2011, Arthur wanted to share the devastating yet surprisingly encouraging aspects of having a vestibular disorder, which resulted in his fictional memoir, Dizzy. The characters are fictional, but the medical storyline is all Arthur's and very relatable to all of our stories. Welcome, Arthur. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and to share what we're all going through.
Yeah.
It's great to see you, Arthur. And you also, Cynthia. I am going to announce she is not my twin, but we have twin names. Cynthia Connell, who is a travel agent with personal travel management in Vancouver, Canada, and a certified Spanish to English translator. Cynthia got her start in the travel industry over 20 years ago as a tour leader, taking small groups of international travelers around Mexico and Central America on 2 to 3 week trips. And she specializes in adventure travel and has set her wandering feet on all 7 continents. Wow. That just sounds so exciting. And I can't wait to hear how you adjust to that with your vestibular disorder. Her journey as a vestibular patient began in 2019 with a diagnosis of vestibular neuritis, which moved on to triple PD and possible vestibular migraine. You guys all know how that goes. So many people have had one diagnosis to start and it becomes something else. So I think a lot of people can relate to that. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to see you again.
Yeah.
Wow, this is so cool to have both of you here. When I first was diagnosed, or when I first started symptoms 8 years ago, I didn't travel for 5 years, like literally. Except for getting in a car, because cars were great for me. The travel actually in passive motion helped a lot, but I didn't get on a plane, and it just changed our lifestyle, my husband's and my lifestyle, dramatically. So Arthur, tell us a little bit about your vestibular journey. When did it start, and how did you deal with your career at that time?
Well, I was not a travel writer at that time. It was December 15th, 2005. And it's amazing how I remember the specific dates and where I was. But I'd written my first novel, and I published it myself, like lots of people are doing, but I was way ahead of the curve. And it got a lot of attention, and a traditional publisher called me and said, did you do this yourself? And I said, yes. And he said, well, we'd like to republish it and then publish a sequel. And at the same time, Warner Brothers contacted me and they said, "This is really interesting. We'd like to talk to you about a sitcom." And I'm like, wow, this is my 50th year in my life. It's the best year of my life. I wrote a book that has now been picked up and it might be a TV show. 3:20 p.m. on 2005, the phone rings for a conference call. I know everybody's voice. And I pick up the phone and it sounded like The Exorcist. I didn't know who I was talking to. Every person's voice was in the wrong octave. And it was just my left ear. But I know enough, and I've never had ear problems ever, that you don't fool around with your ears. I got off the phone and I called my regular doctor, and he sent me to an ENT. And by the time I got to her office, I had lost all hearing in the left ear. I lost my sense of taste and my sense of smell. And she couldn't figure it out. Supposedly, she was supposed to be, I don't know, really good. And it took from 2005 in December to January 29th of 2006 to actually get diagnosed. And everyone kept saying, you have this dizzy thing. And I said, no, it's not dizzy. I'm not dizzy. I don't have any balance, because we did a short-term course of prednisone and everything got better. But at Christmas, I was in a crate and barrel and the vestibular hit. And it was like I walked into an elevator and the car wasn't there, and I dropped and I reached for the first thing, and it was like a whole cabinet of ceramics, and it went down with me in crate and barrel. I had to pay for it. But I thought it was an earthquake. I didn't think it was me. So I finally found a doctor at Mount Sinai who could diagnose it. He was actually quite blasé about it, like, oh yeah, you have vestibular disorder. And I'm like, well, why didn't anybody else know that? And so can you fix my hearing and my taste and my smell and my balance? He said, no, we need to do a spinal tap. I think I was with like a junior spinal tapper. He didn't, I wanted to guide him and say, no, my spine is like over here. They couldn't get enough spinal fluid to make a certain amount of testing, but they did that because they wanted to see if I had encephalitis or some sort of disease that would show up in your spinal fluid. Clear as a bell. So then they put me in the darkened rotational chair, spinning around, which was charming. And they said, oh yeah, your eyes are going like, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't until then that I got through all of that they finally gave me prednisone. And instantly, within 6 hours, I started crying. The tears just, and I'm a crier anyway, but I was eating a club sandwich and I could taste it. I mean, for over a month of not being able to taste food, and then to surprisingly be able to taste it, I was like, I can taste bacon. So I stayed on the prednisone high dose for about a year, and I lost weight. You know how most people get a moon shape and they gain weight? And no, it was like speed for me. Or let's say like 70 cups of coffee. You should have invited me over. I would have painted every wall in your apartment or house gladly, because I had so much energy. So as I was taking the prednisone, I also started physical therapy because I developed oscillopsia, which was, for people listening who don't know what that is, that was really my brain trying to help me out, since it was getting mixed or no signals from my inner ears, because it turned out to be bilateral. Both were damaged. it had to find a way to tell me where I was in space. So my eyes would lock. Do any of you have oscillopsia?
Mm-mm. No.
What it is I will look at something and I'll turn my head and I want to look over here to this light, but my brain won't let my eyes let go of that, what I'm looking at over here. And at one point it'll go, "Ugh," and then it would be, "Ugh, ugh." So that's how, I mean, I couldn't walk down the street. And I
Yeah.
thought, it was like being in a really bad indie film, you know, where the camera is like being handheld. And
Mhm.
um,
Right.
I went to a specialist that calmed down pretty quickly. No, I'm lying. I'm an optimist. It calmed down. My vestibular has never gone away. So this has been 19 years. I think I should get like a watch or something, you know. It's like,
On your 20th year.
yeah. So I should just, don't send me on a really nice cruise or something. I've done that. No, that would be lovely. I wouldn't mind. But so that's where I'm at. I just came back from Costa Rica for work. I started travel writing in 2017. So that's pretty late in my career. And it was totally unexpected. I started a blog called The Dizzy Traveler. And this travel magazine found it and said, "Do you want to write for us?" So it was very similar to what happened with that book that I self-published, and then the traditional publisher saying, "Do you want us to publish it?" So amazing things that happened in the midst of horror. I mean, you know, at night, I knew I was getting better the day I stopped crying, because I think, and I'm going to do it. All right. I think Mother Nature is kind in that I don't remember what it's like not to have this. I think when that moment happened, and it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to accept this. It was like all of a sudden I don't remember what it's like not to have this.
Yeah.
So, I, so that's my signal to stop rambling. I'm
Well, it's
sorry.
good timing because I have a cat I have to let out too. So.
I was, Arthur, as I was listening to your story, I reminded of something Bridget Wallace, who's a physical therapist, once said, that once you've heard one vestibular patient's story, you've heard one vestibular patient's story. Everyone's story is so different,
Yeah.
and your story is really unique, and especially with the sudden onset of the vestibular loss. So, Cynthia, I'm interested.
And
What?
I just want to add one thing. I never told you what caused it.
Oh yes. What's
So
that?
they don't know.
Oh,
So that was the biggest thing. After all that, I said, so what caused it? They said, it could have been a viral or a bacterial infection. Probably
right.
went to your brain. It did the damage before you felt it, and now it's gone.
Yeah, that lovely word idiopathic. We don't know, but it's a very smart scientific word.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So Cynthia, tell us about your vestibular journey and how you started. When did you start feeling the vestibular symptoms? Was it sudden, like with Arthur?
It was very sudden. I had never actually heard of the vestibular system until 2019. And same as Arthur, I remember the date, July 16th, 2019, probably around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I was at work and I was standing at my desk talking to one of my colleagues, and all of a sudden it just felt like the room had kind of shifted. So it was enough to like make me grab onto my desk, like, whoa, kind of what was that? And it stopped, and then it happened again, but it happened for a little bit longer the next time. And then, so I sat down on the couch, and then I was sitting facing a wall that had two masks hanging on either side of the television screen. And the masks started spinning. Like, I mean, I don't even know if I had a clear idea of what vertigo was until that day. And it was like a kaleidoscope. And I'm like, okay, there's something definitely wrong here. I had been to the dentist earlier that day, so I called them and they said, "Oh, well, maybe you just need some food." And and so I mean, I'm like, no, I'm about to vomit up my lunch, so no, I don't need any food. And then it just kept getting worse and worse, and so I was at the point where I couldn't even sit up. I couldn't open my eyes. So they called the ambulance and they carted me out of there on a stretcher. And I spent the night in the hospital. They did the Epley maneuver and it didn't work. And in the morning, they just said, well, here are some pills. Like, go home and you should be fine by Saturday. And this was a Tuesday. And I mean, I was lucky because my friend was there to visit me. And so I couldn't have walked out of there by myself. There was no way. She kind of describes it as like walking with a drunken baby giraffe. So, I got home and yeah, I made it to the couch. And then I think that's probably where I stayed for the next month or so. For the first week, I couldn't sit up. I couldn't look at screens. I had the nystagmus, which my eyes were just bouncing all over the place. And then my mom was staying with me. And so she was calling around and she talked to an ENT and she just said, well, look at her eyes. And if they're moving at all, then take her back to the hospital. So I went back to the hospital and saw, I remember a group of about 4 neurologists standing around me going, oh, yeah, no, I see it on the left one. Oh, that's really moving. And at one point I was on the table and the doctor asked me, how many of me do you see? There were 4. And there was actually only 1 doctor in the room at the time.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was my introduction to the vestibular world.
So were you also experiencing vertigo?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So you had it all.
Yeah, I had it all. Yeah. I mean, in that first week, I think I was sleeping probably about 20 hours a day. I couldn't walk to the bathroom by myself. My mother was an angel and came and stayed with me and, helped me with everything. And then gradually, I think, I was looking at my notes last night because I made notes as I went along. And I think by the 3rd week, I was able to make my own cup of coffee, which was a huge accomplishment. And then that was followed by like a 5-hour nap. So it was a really gradual process. I was off work for about 2 months. And then when I went back, that was much harder than I expected it to be. And I had real trouble with screens. So I was in doing the vestibular physio at that time. I was going probably 3 to 4 times a week. And my plan at work on the gradual back to work was that I would be 4 hours, half an hour on the computer, and then I had a tent set up in our back room. It's like a little closet where I could just go and sit for like 15 minutes to decompress.
Wow.
And then, and after that 4 hours, I had a day and a half off. But when I got home, it was just impossible for me to do. I mean, I couldn't even look at my phone.
Yeah.
I just lay on the couch and stared at the ceiling until it was time to go back again. So yeah, I had the gradual back to work plan. And then I finally got back to about 4 days a week. And that was in March of 2020. And I think we all remember what happened then. So it was kind of like I entered into this alternate universe in July and finally starting to maybe see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. One of my symptoms too was really bad derealization. So it just felt like I was in a kind of a dream this entire time. And then you wake up and like, oh my gosh, there's a global pandemic. And like, maybe I must really be dreaming. So yeah, so that led to me being laid off from my full-time job, which it was actually kind of good, because I didn't have to deal with any of the disasters that were happening at the time in the travel industry. And then I started kind of anew in June of 2020 and joined a host agency, which is personal travel management. So it's like I have my own business, but I have the support of them with all of their system, and just a great team of people to be working with.
You bring up an interesting point, Cynthia. I mean, I've heard from a lot of vestibular patients, self included, that the pandemic actually, even though it was derailing, it also was helpful for a lot of us because we didn't have these screens and the travel and the social stimuli and all of those things that can sometimes be triggers. So some of us in the vestibular community were like, whew, this is okay.
Totally.
Yeah.
But it also, so Arthur, it makes me think about this the last 2 weeks. Like I was saying before, I've had this horrible, horrible symptoms again. And it's easy when we're feeling good to go, you got to get up and move. You got to get stuff, it's important for your vestibular system to have all of that stimuli. And when we're symptomatic, it's so exhausting. And I remember the last 2 weeks, I just felt like, I know I'm supposed to be moving, but this taking everything for me to just keep my head upright. And I want to know how, Arthur, you deal with that as someone who travels when sometimes the sofa is the only place you want to be.
Yeah. Or sometimes I just fear going to the grocery store. I mean, it's like I had to wrestle with myself this morning to do what I had to do, and I thought, you can do it, kiddo. You can do it. Just focus. And one of the most helpful things for me, especially when I know I am booked on a very important press trip or media trip, or Cynthia knows these fam trips. These trips are usually with 10 to 12 travel writers, travel journalists, and we are booked from 7 a.m. to usually about 11 p.m. in the evening every day.
Whoa.
I don't advise that. I don't advise that for anyone traveling. But what I do is I sit down with myself and I say, you cannot, I know you're really upset, Arthur, and you're scared, and someone might find out. I might lose my job, but I have to not emotionally invest in it. Because the moment I do, I fall apart, and I can't get to the kitchen. And so I put things in compartments. I don't know if that's healthy or not, but it works for me. That's how I deal with it a lot. It's in the big trips that I've been doing since 2017, when I started writing for the magazine. After the earthquake on April 4th, and then going into a horrible period that I'm just emerging from, I went to Costa Rica. And I was a little apprehensive, knowing what triggers me off. And it's a rainforest country. I went to a luxurious villa complex that's built above the canopy of the rainforest in Costa Rica. Gorgeous. I couldn't see straight. I couldn't walk straight. I would pick up my fork and I would miss my mouth. That's how bad it was. I I did something I've never done, and this is also how I cope. I I confided in someone, because I was the only person on this press trip. Usually in every press trip, I will find someone I can say, oh, I have this going on. Can I hold your elbow for like in a mass of people, and I don't have a stationary object to kind of focus on. Can I just hold your arm? In Costa Rica, I had a driver, and I confessed to him. Well, he guessed because he said, "Something's going on, isn't there?" And I said, "The tears." Yeah, I can't. You're a beautiful driver, but I can't see a thing. Everything's just going by too fast, and my head's bouncing and my body's bouncing. And he said, "Are you drunk?" I said, "No, I'm not drunk. I'd like a drink, but no, I'm not drunk." For the rest of the trip, he was my hero. He went beyond his job and made sure in every space I was at, he had an arm for me if I needed it. I found out that first night, my villa, one of the 12 above the canopy, was down a dimly lit cement walkway. And I didn't know this, but it goes up and it goes down and it curves the walkway. And the first up, and then not knowing there was a down, I went down. And I went down in I'd just been given a tour that day of the most exotic, expensive plantings that the company had put in. And I fell into it.
Oh,
And when I got up, I was, what it's like. Once you're down, it's like, how do I get back up? I pulled it all out from the dirt, the roots and everything.
oh,
I'm holding these and I'm
Arthur.
like, and I know there's security cameras, and I'm like, oh fuck, you're gonna know it's. I'm sorry, can I say that?
Yes.
Um, I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but these are don't travel alone, and when you can find people that you can confide in, and right after Costa Rica, 3 days I was supposed to turn around and go to Ireland for a castle and garden tour, and it's the first time I've ever canceled a trip because I knew it was not going to be safe. It wasn't. I was going to be a liability to myself. I was going to be a liability to the Bureau of Tourism. And the woman said, "What's wrong? Do you have COVID?" I said, "I kind of wish. No, I have this," and blah, blah, blah. And she said, "My dad had that." And I went, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so happy, but I'm sorry." So, she said, "I absolutely understand. We can change the schedule. We can make it so that it's easier for you, that we're on solid ground and no gravel and no hills to climb and stairs with railings." But I said, "No, I got to cancel."
Wow.
Well, I love hearing that. I think that that's really important. I mean, not only don't travel alone, but ask for help when you need it, because people they are empathetic, and people in the travel industry, whether it's the travel agents, or people in the tour, or at a hotel or at a restaurant, they want you to have a positive experience, so they will go out of their way to accommodate you. I think
Yeah.
that's a great message, because I think we're very often, we don't want to share what's going on for us, because we think that people might think that we're drunk, or we're making it up, or we're exaggerating, or for whatever reason. So don't be afraid to share. Cynthia, I know, as a travel agent, I'm curious if you work with a lot of people who have health issues that make traveling a challenge. Do you?
I actually don't, um, because my niche is adventure travel, which
Ah,
which means something different to everyone. I mean, adventure for somebody could be just getting on a plane and going to Costa Rica. But I don't have a lot of people. Did have some clients who one of them is losing his vision, and they're going to climb Kilimanjaro in September. So, just working with local operators and letting them know. And then, there are some
Wow.
accommodations that can be made.
So that's interesting because, it isn't very ubiquitous, as we all know. I mean, even though you say, Cynthia, if we open up our mouths and we talk about it with other people, sometimes someone says, I know someone with that, but it still hasn't infiltrated into a lot of industries. And I'm actually curious too, Arthur, in your industry, do you have like you're probably freelance, but do you have an editor if you're writing for Passport that you have to submit? Do they know that you struggle with these, or have you withheld information because you're afraid of how it would appear? And then on the heels of that, I'm curious because you probably want to write a little bit about these experiences for people with disabilities or vestibular disorders. And are they okay with that?
What I do, I would think that my editor and my publisher knows about all of this, because on my blog that they first discovered me at, the Dizzy Traveler, that's why it's called the Dizzy Traveler, which now I should change it to the Unbalanced Traveler or something. I'm not dizzy, I'm unbalanced.
Yeah.
If he reads my bio there, he should know exactly what's going on. And I also include in many of the articles on my blog tips for those with vertigo, with bilateral vestibular, with oscillopsia, Meniere's disease. But I have not come out of the closet with my magazine. And although I am freelance, I'm their feature writer. I mean, I just finished my 42nd feature since 2007. So that's 7 years. And I don't write for anybody else. I actually don't have time to do any more. Unfortunately, and this isn't on topic, but unfortunately, the magazine world does not pay well. Yes, you get beautiful trips, and most of it is on the house, but you can't make a living on it. It's tough. But I have the books that I wrote, and that's constantly bringing in revenue. And did I cover everything? There was
Yeah, well, or is there, so if so you haven't come out of the closet, you said, with it,
not
but
with
is there a sense
Passport.
that potentially, some of the editors or publishers might have concerns about you with that and not send you on these trips, or is that the reason why you haven't come out?
Yeah, those are my concerns. I'm afraid. I was afraid when I canceled this English garden tour. I got that on my own, and that's the beauty of what's happening now. These bureaus of tourism are contacting me outside of Passport. And so he was surprised. He said, "Where did this come from?" And I said, "I got it myself. I'm going to Norway at the end of the summer, and I got that on myself. I got that by myself. That Prague to Danube River cruise, I got it myself. But I like when I did cancel the English thing. I'm lucky. My editor, I think, is really, really busy, and he forgets things. He never asked about it. I was going to come out of the closet and tell him blah 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 blah. And then I thought, okay, so I don't go on any trips. Okay, so then I don't have to worry about that. But I got to make a living. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
It's it. I feel guilty that I haven't come out. I mean, I'm also, if you haven't guessed, uh, I'm gay, and I never had a coming out with being gay. I just always was. My mom said she knew I was gay because I was a breech. True. True.
My mom called it sunny side up. I was sunny side up.
That's a good drag name. Sunny side up.
Oh, Kimberly, I think that's your new nickname.
That's my new nickname, sunny side up.
Yeah.
Arthur, we can share it.
So clearly, Arthur, even though you haven't, like you said, come out of the closet as a travel writer, you clearly have to make your own adjustments when you travel. And so I'm gonna, address a question to both of you from a different perspective. Arthur, you as a traveler, and Cynthia, you as a travel agent, what let's talk to the people out there who have vestibular problems and want to travel and are afraid to. How would you recommend that they go about it? And let's start with planning where they would go. And I mean, I think there are a lot of issues that we can talk about. Things like motion sickness, the trouble with the busy environment seems to be a huge one.
Hmm.
Um, and just being overwhelmed by too much stimulus, because the whole
Yeah.
point of going somewhere is doing new things, new and
Right.
different things. You're not going to just sit on the couch. So, Cynthia, do you want to maybe start with, if you were planning a trip for someone who had a vestibular disorder,
Hmm.
how would you start? How would you approach that?
Um, First of all, I think I'd want to know a bit more about their vestibular disorder. I mean, what are their triggers? What are the things that are difficult for them? Challenges. I know, for myself, most of my travels were before this happened, and I didn't get on a plane for about a year and a half until after, and I was scared getting on the plane. I had no idea what was going to happen. My ears are like I'm at 30,000 feet all the time. So, I mean, that doesn't really make a difference to me. But, I mean, I had no idea what was going to happen after. So I wanted to keep it short. So, wherever this person lives, maybe there's something local or just like a state or two away that they could start with. I think it's important to not kind of bite off more than you can chew when you're starting. I mean, I think back to my initial recovery and how I would set the goal of walking to the end of the hall. So it could be the same thing with travel. You set the goal of, I want to, I don't know, go and spend some time on a horse farm,
Mhm.
and or something that's fairly easily accessible, and not kind of expecting too much as well.
Mhm.
Um, my most recent trip was in January, and I went to Mexico for 10 days. And that was kind of the first trip for me that really felt like getting a piece of myself back. Um, but there was also, I remember a day when I thought, I'm going to take the bus to this city, and then, I'm going to go and do this hike in the afternoon. And in the morning, I'm going to get up and do something. And I took the bus and I got some lunch, and then I ended up laying under the fan for 16 hours. Right? Like,
Mhm.
that's it. That's all I can do. So it's just about, kind of baby steps when they're getting into travel.
Mm. And pacing yourself, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
And Arthur, you
Absolutely.
mentioned this, um, adjusting your expectations.
Yeah. And I would also definitely recommend when you're first dipping your toes back into travel, don't do it alone.
No.
And I was going to say, Cynthia, that just don't go too far. Just, like baby steps, maybe go up to from New York, maybe up to New Hampshire or something and come back, or Cape Cod. But I also wanted to say that periodically I have inflammation in my inner ears, and I have some tricks or tips, or I don't know. Am I jumping the gun here?
No,
No, let's hear
please.
it.
um, Afrin, which I think is, you have to be so careful with it because it's very addictive. Afrin, 30 minutes before you take off, you do two in one nostril, two in the other, and then put your head between your knees. They're all going to think you're throwing up or something's wrong, but just pretend to be doing something with your bag under the seat in front of you. But stay like that for about 15 seconds, because if you just spray upright, the afferent's going to go up your nose and down your throat, and it's got to stay up here.
Hmm.
When it's about 30 minutes before you land, do all this over the same thing again, and your ears will not need to pop,
Mhm.
and that fullness will actually go away. Another trick I found is in taking your earlobe and gently pulling it down and pulling it out, and then wiggling your jaw, and that's going to open
Oh, yeah.
it. But that just popped. That just popped. Um, Kimberly, you had a tail walk by you.
Yes.
It
I have
looked
a
like
tail.
a feather. So I also, you must be real flexible, like Anthea was saying, with your your schedule, because you might want to do all those things, but listen to your body. You know it, and if you need to rest, if you need to, in Costa Rica, one day they wanted to offer me a 2 hour, not a Swedish massage. It was supposed to be something more special, from 8 to 10, and then it was an hour and a half ride with my driver to um, a mangrove tour on a river, and it was brilliant. And then I was the drive back, and then I was going to have this big luncheon, and then there was time for me to go on a hike around the villa, and then they were taking me out to dinner on another mountain, and I canceled the massage, which I would have loved, and I canceled the dinner later that night. And I thought, even though the company wanted me to experience these things, I can't do it. The other thing is with massage, you've got to be careful, because you're lying on your stomach, sometimes with your head in the hollow, but mostly it's to the side. And then you switch to the other side. And we all know what this is doing with those crystals. Then you
Mhm.
flip to your back. And if you aren't with someone who really knows what they're doing, they can really mess you up. And I
Yeah.
thought, nope, I love the luxury of it, and you're paying for it, but I'm going to pass.
It's too much of a risk.
Yeah.
One of
So,
the things I learned too is to, when I started traveling for work, I would just schedule in a day before we started working. So, because for me, there was always a day of recovery from the airline travel. And it would just exaggerate symptoms. And if my husband was with me, I would have him, literally like a big sandbag. He would just lay on top of me so I could kind of like rediscover gravity. But if I would have to, typically you just fly in, go to bed, and 4 a.m. call time, and you're up the next day. And I was like, nope, gotta have that extra built-in day to just do nothing, eat, get room service if you have to. I mean, literally just settle in. And that was helpful for sure.
And I imagine that you want to do it on either side of your trip also. If someone's traveling, like I do this for myself, even though I don't have a vestibular disorder and I'm traveling, I I have at least a day that I can rest when I get back, like taking a vacation from my vacation
Mhm.
before, jumping back into work.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
Arthur, Cynthia, do you do that when you're traveling?
Absolutely. My experience flying has been very different every time, so I never know what to expect. I've ranged from having, feeling like I'm getting off a boat and it stays around. I think the shortest period was probably for about 3 days, and then after that, I was having these horrible headaches and neck pain and whatnot. But the worst was it lasted for 3 weeks after I got off the plane. So, I mean, fortunately, that was when I was coming home, so I didn't have to do much. But yeah, I think having those days of rest and factoring that in,
Mhm.
and I mean, you and in terms of activities as well, when you're traveling, you just want to maybe pick one or maximum two during the
Mhm.
day, and it's all about pacing yourself.
Yeah, and when you're traveling with family or friends, I imagine that there's a big element of not wanting to disappoint them. So, communicating in advance and really sticking with your boundaries. And if they are gonna, if you don't want to hold them back, but it's okay for them to go out and do things without you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. My next trip, I'm going to Italy at the end of this month. And it will be my first time off the continent since 2019. So I'm excited. I'm a bit nervous, but I'm partly it's independent travel, and then I'm also going with an adventure tour operator. And my friend and I looked at all of their itineraries, and a lot of them were, 2 days in one place, 2 days in another place, and a lot of them were just we thought, I thought that's going to be too much for me. So in the end, we chose one that's actually staying in one place, but it has day excursions. So we're in the same place for a week on a lemon farm in the south of Italy.
Ooh,
And yeah, yeah.
I
And
want to go.
I know, right?
I'll
And
write
so
about it.
I can contact me. I'll book you on it. Yeah. But yeah, so she can go out and do, any like the excursions. I have the option of going out to do them. And, I mean, if I'm not feeling up for it, then I'll just go and lie under a lemon tree for the day. So
That
Great.
sounds like the title of a movie, Lying Under a Lemon Tree.
Or
that's
Under the
next.
Tuscan Sun. I think it's more a
Yes.
novel. Yeah. And then they make the movie, right?
Yeah.
I was going to add, Cynthia, when you were mentioning this, the Ireland Castle Garden tour that I canceled. And again, after all these 19 years, it's the first time, whether it was for work or pleasure, I ever canceled anything. It totally freaked my brain out. And I thought, with this tour company where I landed this job, they're never going to book me again. And they called yesterday and they said, we have a trip to Ireland where you would be covering gay pride in Dublin.
Oh,
And then we want to take you up to the north of Ireland, up to Belfast, way up on the coast along Giant's Causeway, where they did Game of Thrones and all this other stuff that you missed, that you would have seen the first time around. And I thought, and here I was afraid that I was going to lose everything.
wow.
And I got more.
That's
And
so awesome.
and I also want to add, in terms of, well, I don't know, it can't be the same for everyone. We're all so different. I have become kind of a cruise expert. And one thing that happens when I cruise, and I love transatlantic cruises, is you don't feel any time change. They take 7 days to get across. You get off the boat, and it's like, you don't have to deal with it.
Mm.
I was on one trip that was so rough. I don't know what was going on. I think it's because the seas are getting warmer or something. But everyone on the ship, and they're going down hallways, and they're all like, "Bleh, and I'm walking like this, just straight as an arrow. And I'm actually looking around like this, and I'm not falling over. I'm not feeling bad. When I'm on a cruise, all my symptoms are canceled out.
Yeah.
It's almost like the cruise in bad weather is mimicking what I feel all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt fine. So then I thought, oh, damn it. I'm going to have to get a job like on a cruise ship because, I can handle it. The other thing with,
Arthur, I had the same experience too on the first boat that I was on. I thought, oh no, this is going to be horrible. And I was like, wait a minute.
it
This
was
is
okay.
great.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
perfect until the boat stopped. Then it, pulled up on the dock and then it all came back.
Yeah, it was like that when I was in Mexico too. I was out whale watching, and we were on the boat for, probably a total of 6 hours each day. And
Was
I
it
was,
rough?
it wasn't too rough, no. But I mean, I was thinking, oh gosh, like this whole boat thing. And no, I mean, when I got off the boat, it didn't stop. Later in the dining room on the land, it was still like that.
Oh,
And I was actually, we were, it was a luxury kind of tent experience. And it felt like I was sleeping in a hammock when I was on a queen size bed, but it was actually kind of lovely when I wrapped my head around it. I mean, just thinking about the wind blowing, and I could hear the ocean, and here I am sleeping in this, in quotation marks, hammock.
Yeah. I think that I'm observing the two of you, and I think there's a really interesting take home message. Part of it might be because you're both travelers, and that sort of optimism that needs to happen when you are embarking on these adventures of the unknown. But I think that you mentioned this earlier, Arthur, you really try to not get down on yourself when you're in these experiences. And I think this is a really important tool when we're traveling. We maybe just know that there's going to be a bad day, or maybe know that and just instead of, having a breakdown about it, just laughing about it, pretending you're in a hammock, whatever tricks that you need to do to just go, well, I'm going to lay under a lemon tree today. And I think that is such a huge part about not turning these episodes into something that can actually get worse. And I'm speaking to myself for this because that's what I did. This is why mine lasted for so long and was so bad for so long, is because I just kept trying to make it go away. And then I would freak out. And so I don't know, you both have such a jolly perspective. And obviously I'm seeing you in a little snapshot here, and we have our terrible moments too, but I would imagine you don't get too hard on yourself when the symptoms do go up.
No, I mean, for me, I think because I don't really have any what I would call balance issues. And I have a kind of constant pressure in my head and my ears. I mean, I think like anything, even when I go running, I'll run, it'll be fine. And then I stop running, and there's something that my brain is just like, whoa, I'll have to stop and hold on to something for, just 30 seconds or so. And I mean, I absolutely had some very dark times in my vestibular journey, but I look back to the beginning, and I just think about like, wow, I couldn't walk, I couldn't sit up. So the fact that I'm kind of getting on a plane and going, my first trip was to Winnipeg in November, which is pretty bleak. But
But
I
you
got on
did
that
it.
plane. But I did. I got on that plane, and I just started crying when it took off. I was so like, wow, it is possible. And there were times during that, the first year or so, when I didn't know if it would be again.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it, just the gratitude for how far I've come.
When I started traveling again, I bought, no, I didn't buy it. I won it. I'm a geeky sweepstakes enter, and I actually win things, big things. But I won this suitcase, but it's really small. It's like, but I can get everything in it for a week for Europe. I mean, maybe I'm a good packer, but it's still heavy. But it's like, it looks like a little boy's school book bag. And I was going to Porto, Portugal, and a trick I have is I just check everything because it's too hard. The aisles are too narrow. I'm not going to drag this little thing behind me or in front of me and fall and trip and hit people, or even try to pick it up over my head, and I'm going to fall backwards and then hurt somebody. I just check it. And this woman a stranger had the nerve to say, "Are you going to check that book bag?" And I looked at her and I said, "Yeah, I am. Is that all right?" I mean, she said, "You can't pick it up." And I said, "Look, I can pick it up." And I didn't even want to give her I didn't even want to explain anything to her. I just wanted to get away from her. But I'm saying this because it's a tip that the less you have to wrestle with, the less problems you'll have when you're traveling, especially when you're on that plane and you're trying to find a space up there for your luggage and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure you, as you said, Arthur, you know exactly what you need. And part of that is, from experience. So, sharing, what's one thing that each of you would say to a vestibular patient out there who has been afraid to travel, who's maybe, let's say, that, like all of you, has been through the rough times, is starting to regain some normalcy, wants to start to travel, but is afraid in some way. What's just one piece of hope, or whether it's a tip or just a word of wisdom? What would you share with them?
That's a tough one to come up with just one. But I would say if you're starting to think about traveling, just look at how far you've come from, where your vestibular journey started, and the fact that, you're starting to think about traveling and challenging yourself a little bit more, that, that's exciting. And I think the vestibular issues it's a really complicated thing. I mean, there's the physical and there's the mental. And that mental part just makes you kind of, for me, I feel stronger. And so you just have to kind of try to tap into that and be patient with yourself. Take it slow, and it is possible.
Manage your expectations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's also important to be super flexible with your itinerary, with so many things. One thing that I think I would say is that after years of doing physical therapy with Rusk Institute, and if your physical therapist and your docs all give you the okay to travel, it's so important to put yourself back out into life, because it's super easy. I loved the pandemic, not the pandemic, but I loved being locked up in my house. I was deliriously happy. I didn't have to deal with any of that.
Me too.
Yeah.
And but now that I've done all my physical therapy, and it's still 24/7, I realized on my first trip that life is my therapy now. And I have to embrace that. And as hard as it is, as it is to go outside because you forgot the avocado, and you go and you get it, and you make sure you're not run over by a bus, and you come back. It's like, I say, go out and travel and experience the world. And when you come home, there may be war stories to tell, but you'll tell war stories, but you'll say quietly to yourself, and then, okay, I'm going to cry. You're just going to whisper to yourself, I did it. I did it.
I love that quote. I want to remember that. Life is my therapy.
Yeah. So beautiful.
Part of the adventure.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Having a vestibular disorder in and of itself is an adventure.
Yeah.
I'll go on another one, right?
Every day is interesting.
I know. It's always like, what's my brain going to come up with next?
Talking with you guys just makes me smile.
I know. This is so fun.
No, and I know that you guys have inspired lots of people out there who are going to be listening to us to make that to take that step, to take that adventure and try traveling again. So I'm excited for all of them.
Me too.
Yes. Yeah. And keep us updated with all of your future travels.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to share with us. And Arthur, I know that you are having one of those dizzy, I'll call it a dizzy day, although I know it's not dizziness for you, those vestibular days. So thank you especially for pushing through and sharing your experiences.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
And thank you, Cynthia.
both. So
Yeah,
wonderful
thank
to
you
get
for the
both.
invitation. It was great.
Yeah.
Right.
Fun.
Thank you,
All right.
everyone, and
Take care.
happy travels.
Same to you.
Thanks for tuning in to ICU this month.
We hope this conversation sparked new understanding of the vestibular journey. And for all of our patients out there, leaves you feeling just a little more heard and a little more seen. I see you.